Hey, all. Thanks for listening. Now we're talking with Doug Pagitt. It was probably a little loud, but I'm excited because John Musick's sitting here next to me.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, John. Those of you who are fans of the Doug Pagitt radio show will say, John Musick is back?
Yeah, that's right.
As a co-host?
That's right. I'm out on bail. I'm ready to party.
We're ready to roll. So John had a great idea that we revisit the Trump presidency, 5 possibilities that I suggested at the start of or just after the election. And John and I might be doing some other podcasts together. Do you want to tell the kids about that?
Well, I was thinking that maybe we could do something where we just explore the news once a week. Where we just handpick a handful of stories and we would just go over them. Some stories about politics, some stories about human interest, maybe some stories of the bizarre, and pitch them to each other.
And chat about them. Mm-hmm. So we've been promising you, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you're creating more goodness in the world through this podcast. So if you're not already and you want to go over to DougPagitt.com and click on that Patreon link, this is the kind of thing that makes it happen. It buys coffee and microphones for John and I to make this kind of magic happen.
And, and you submit that $5 to help create some goodness in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You want to help create some greatness. How about $10?
Greatness is just double goodness.
That's right. It's goodness squared.
It's the life by the Enneagram 7.
That's right. That is, isn't it?
From good to great, just do twice as much good. I love it. All right, so here it is. John and I talking for another 50 minutes about...
50 minutes, really?
Yeah, it was 54 minutes. A reflection on the 5 things, the 5 possible outcomes of the Trump presidency.
Really, really interesting.
Reflection a year later. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, thanks for being part of all this. You're good people.
Be informed.
I don't actually know all of you, but the people I do know who listen to this, you're a good person. So I think all of you are good people.
Yeah, that's a problem. Hey, Doug,
Hey, John.
Just between me and you, in between bowel movements, do you ever have to go, kind of just take a utility wipe? You know what I mean? Just a maintenance.
Almost all the time. We have a little bidet.
I see. Yeah, I saw that.
Sometimes in the middle of the day, I just get up and go and just clean up with the bidet. Feels great. That little tushy, it's the brand name.
Yeah.
That you add it to your toilet.
Uh-huh.
It's fantastic.
Good.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I've bought a lot of things on Amazon.
Right.
That is the best. All right, you ready? Here we go.
Well,
we're going live.
Well, you don't want to go cheap when it comes to butt cleanliness. That's for sure.
You want your.
Oh, hi.
If you're going to be clean somewhere. You want to be clean there. Hey, everybody. Doug Pagitt here with John Musick. Now we're talking with Doug Pagitt and John Musick.
Aww.
John and I have partnered together on a lot of projects, and this is one of them. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Trump presidency a year plus in.
That's right. About a year and a couple of months ago, you put out a podcast right after the verification of the election of the president.
Yeah.
Where you listed 5 possible outcomes for the Trump presidency, and I thought that was very very clear. I thought you did a good job in examining some of the potential things, and so a year has passed now. So I thought maybe it'd be a good idea if we could just go back and take a look at those things again.
Yeah, and I went back and rewatched it. Mm-hmm. It was I referred to it as the Friday after the day that the world ended.
In the first video, you mentioned that, it's really pathetic, but where 5 minutes doesn't go by where I don't realize that Hillary's not the president. That's not what you said, but so how many minutes now? After a year and several months have gone by, how many minutes now go by before you think, oh shit, this really happened?
Yeah, that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. That it still, I still think about it every day. I have not moved on in my healing. I still think about it every day, and I'm still totally and completely befuddled by it, honestly. So in that sense, I talked a bit about the stages of grief.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll repost that video for people that want to watch. It's 13 minutes long. I don't think I'm stuck in the stages. I just think I'm continuing around the path of the stages.
You're not working through them at all?
I am not working. I am staying. I'm staying very deeply connected.
Is it like working the 12 steps where, you got to get that first step down before you can go to number 2, et cetera?
Well, this is one of the things that people who work in grief talk about, is that the stages of grief actually are not like that. That you don't have, they're not sequential, and you don't have to finish one. That maybe it is more like the 12 steps than I'm making it sound like, but that you constantly or you often revisit some of those steps. You still feel the sadness.
Sure.
The steps are denial, anger, bargaining, sadness or bereavement.
Yeah, I guess like the anger over such a loss doesn't ever just disappear. It just kind of comes and goes. But,
right.
But are you still like whining daily about this? I mean, is it really?
I think I do whine daily about this. Not totally proud of the fact that I'm whining daily about it. These kinds of conversations I find to be helpful. I'm an external processor, and like to think that getting things out frees me from them. I'm not totally sure that's a great plan all the time. When it comes to
you mean, like taking your burden and placing it upon another person?
It sort of gets it off my back.
Yeah.
The monkey theory.
Right.
Yeah, so I do think a lot about this, and I think I care a lot about the presidency. I think the presidency in the United States plays a unique role, and it has a cultural effect on many, if not all of us. So I think it matters. I know there's a lot of people, and I've met them. Friends of mine have met new people who just they're convinced that politics and the presidency just doesn't matter as much as I think it does. They're like, it's not that big a deal. Just sort of let it go. And I get it. I mean, I think that for me, the political life, and I don't just mean partisan politics, but the life we live together in a country matters a lot. So I like to think about meta narratives, like religious narratives and political. That really does matter to me. So someone like me will say, yeah, that it has great effect on the human psyche and human behavior. And because the United States plays a particular role in the world, I think that has an unearned amount of power sometimes.
It's a long reach.
It's a long reach.
One thing I think I'm irritated about is just the presence of the figure of the president all the time. Like being reminded of this foul person. I mean, it's just regardless of, and I'm not just like being, Johnny Liberal here. But it's just like, that why is this annoying, person constantly, in front of me?
Mm-hmm.
But I think too, one thing that I thought about is that I didn't really realize, that the president could run that much amok. Like we were told, well, the president's kind of hemmed in by the, the balance of power and stuff. But boy.
Looking back at that video, I was thinking about that I was even saying, there's a lot of people who say, look, the president's not that big of a deal. They can't do all that much. I've said that at different times. Like, let's be careful and know that the president is not more powerful than the populace, but the president has a unique set of responsibilities and powers. And when those are invoked, and one of those is the leader of the political experience that represents everyone. The presidency is the only office that represents everyone in the country by design. So,
right.
So everything else is you're represented by a state or where you live. The presidency is the one that expands over all of them. So that has a unique psychological effect, that it is our president. And it's been very hard for me to say that. I can now say that. Donald Trump is our president, is my president in the sense that any person has, personal ownership of a president. But he's my president, too, and that's why I think we have to stay on it constantly and vigilantly.
Vigilantly?
Mm-hmm. Vigilantly?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't
think that's the word either.
If it is, it's a bad one.
Yeah. Stay vigilant. Stay vigilant on this. And so I really think it matters. So that's why we were going to revisit. Okay, yes. I suggested there were 5 paths this thing could take, and you've reminded me of that. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to have a little commentary about those 5.
That's right. Well, you want to just jump on in? Begin with number 1?
Yeah. So,
But hey, let me ask you this question before we do this. I'm curious. For so many liberal people, they are emotionally affected by this president. He triggers them. How much of the weight that we put into this person's personality is based upon like how we were raised, with the presidents on the wall and in our schools, and just how we were, like, our minds were molded, whether directly or indirectly, by media and news and television. That this person should be held in a high extreme. I mean, obviously what you just said, because of the responsibility and the long reach of their influence. But like there's a lot of other countries where they're like, president's a joker. They don't even. Who cares? Right.
Well, for a number of years, there are people, last 8 years, there were people in this country on the conservative side of politics saying, hey, you people that create this like imperial presidency and like fawn over the president and think with Barack Obama, think the president has all this power and he's like your fashion icon and you miss him and you love him.
Yeah.
Like, you just you just had an overblown view and power of the presidency.
To begin with, yeah.
I think there are times when it's overblown. It has changed in our society. The role of the president has changed dramatically. But from the founding of this country, the presidency has been a significant role. And it carries a certain kind of power because it reflects on the people in a unique way. And this is why I was so heartbroken that turnout in the idea that democracy is the greatest way to recognize the wisdom of the crowd. I believe that deeply. That I believe in the wisdom of the crowd theory, that all of us know something that any of us don't know, even the experts. The greatest expert is the us.
Right.
I like that theory. I believe that. I think that's true. One of the things that happens in representative...
Well, it worked for Nazi Germany, so...
One of the things that happens in representative voting democracies, including in places like Germany and in the United States, is that we don't actually hear from the crowd. What we hear from is 1/3 of the crowd, because 2/3 don't actually participate in sharing their voice. Now, that is a means of sharing your voice that I'm not going to share. But we're not actually... When we elect anyone, especially the president, we're not hearing from everyone. We're hearing from the people who self-selected to vote. And all the people who don't vote, I think that's a self-muting of their contribution, and we're all better off for it. So I think everyone should be in there voting, even if you don't like the choices, because it's a way that you exercise your particular opinions. And I happen to think that voting is not about your personal statement. I think it's your tool in a democracy, and you should use it as a tool and not as your own personal proclivities. So if you're comfortable with the behavior of a person for being the president, then you should vote for him. So it's a complicated relationship we have with the presidency. I remember hating Gerald Ford in junior high.
Oh, why? Because he was...
Well, as a junior higher, I was quite sophisticated because we had to take the presidential fitness test.
Okay.
And he was the president at the time. So it was the presidential fitness test, and we had to climb a rope and do pull-ups.
Right.
And in 6th grade, I was 6 foot tall, 160 pound, 6th grader.
Yeah. You should have nailed that.
Couldn't do a pull-up with my little underdeveloped, and they're still underdeveloped, but my little underdeveloped 12-year-old arms that were having to lift 160 pounds.
You didn't get the patch?
No, they made me do the bent arm hang.
Oh, okay.
Instead of the pull-ups.
Oh, yeah.
Well, back then when we made gender distinctions in the presidential fitness test, I don't know what they do now. It was me and the girls.
That's right.
It was me and the girls.
That's right.
Boys did pull-ups.
Because women have universally weak upper body strength. They weren't required to do the pull-ups. They just had to do the hang-on.
The bent arm hang.
And wait for a man to come rescue you.
Yeah.
That's what...
Yeah. Now,
rescue you with a pull-up.
I didn't mind being, put in the community of the girls. It wasn't a male thing.
You were comfortable.
I hated the whole thing. We had to run the half mile around the track. So the whole time, bent arm hang, can't climb the rope, running around the track. I was cursing the name of Gerald Ford, the president of the United States. So the presidency plays a unique role, and we all have a particular viewpoint about it. I do think Donald Trump's behavior as a citizen, as the president, is what I've become in the last 16 months increasingly oppositional to. Like, my opposition to Donald Trump has grown over this time because the way he is behaving as a person, as a citizen who's in the role of the presidency. It's like, not an ontological.
Well, we're not surprised that he may have a conservative agenda and push those things. Those aren't surprising. It's this, it's this constant barrage of bizarre behavior that seems to, I don't know, tear at that office or something.
Yes, to tear at the office and to tear at the what I think is the legitimacy of a country that can be ruled by a set of agreements.
Well, speaking of legitimacy, we have a list here, and let's get on with that.
All right.
How was that?
That was great.
Yeah, like
so back in the day, I suggested the Friday after the Tuesday when the world ended that there were 5 possible. Why don't you run us through those 5?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that'd be better. And I'll say why I was. Can I start with this disclaimer? I have been wrong about all the things involving Donald Trump, and he has been right about almost all of them. I didn't think people would vote for him. I didn't think people could support him. I didn't think all the things I've said about Donald Trump. I have been wrong about them, and he has been right. And that is so difficult for me to. I mean, I don't like being wrong in the first place. For you. But in this particular case, this is really bad.
Yeah. So your 5 points were, number 1, that Trump would not even be able to take the oath of office. Do we want to do all 5? Do we want to go through all 5 of them first? Or?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay. Was that the Trump would not be able to take the oath of office because of some sort of a legal issue with the election, that something would be pointed out that his winning would be invalidated.
Right. So
did that come to pass?
On that Friday, one of the options that was alive in the air was he won't even be able to take the oath of office. There's going to be something that will disqualify him. Mm-hmm. It was good for me to remember back that the idea that he may not be legitimate to be the president because of some kind of criminality was alive back then. That was a good reminder. It's also exhausting that we've been thinking about it since then. So one of the options I thought of the 5, I said there's 5 possible outcomes of this, that he wouldn't take the oath of office. And I never bought that. I didn't think that electors would rally together to keep him from being elected. I didn't think something would be found out. I didn't think... I set that aside as the furthest from possible. And I really saw it as a real problem back then. So I'm glad that was not the outcome.
Well, it's interesting that that would be even one of the options. Like, what was in the air that made you think that maybe there could be something screwy going on that would prevent him from assuming the office?
Well,
I mean, because we have a lot less. We have a lot more information now, and there was hardly any information back then, a year ago.
Right. I was trying to remember, what led me to that. Part of it was people saying that the electors would rally together because we have an
whole kind of
we have an electoral college, and if you could get to the electors, he wouldn't be able to take the oath, or maybe they would find some kind of inconsistencies in the voting record, that things were rigged. Mm-hmm. And so there was sort of a belief at the time that something could prevent him from taking the oath of office, or that people would just determine that he was unfit. Remember, Hillary's primary push against Trump, and a lot of the never-Trumpers, was he is fundamentally unfit to be the president. So there was an idea that he would be determined to be unfit, mm-hmm. and Mike Pence then would become the president. There were 2 pathways that Mike Pence, and this is what I still think is going to happen. Yeah. If there's any indication that I have not moved on, I still have a theory that by January
holding
of 2019,
on to that for 365 days.
That Mike Pence is. Here's how I'll pitch this later, but how Mike Pence is going to become the president of the United States. All right, so that didn't come to pass.
That did not come to pass, and
he did take the oath of office.
He did take the oath of office,
and then gave I won't enter into commentary about all this, but his inauguration speech was just devastatingly bad, and that was all. Much of that was over. The attention was taken away by the march the next day when he was inaugurated on a Friday, and the women's march the next day all around the world. God bless all the people who got out there that day, and have kept that up. It's remarkable that this country rallied millions of people in cities across the country to say, we just wish that had never happened. That is I hope that doesn't become the norm in this country, right? Parenthetically, this is why I don't support big third-party candidate movements, because when you have presidents that are not elected with a majority, it damages the country. And if you end up with 3 or 4 or 5 parties, you're going to end up with people winning the elections with 25% or less of the vote, and it's just going to be a minority party and rule kind of theory, and I think it's just bad for them.
Well, maybe the big wish is that not only will people rally, but maybe we'll rally before the problem.
Yeah, maybe they should have rallied on November 8th.
Hey,
thank you.
All power to you, women's.
But, and the men too that didn't get out and vote. And you and I find ourselves in the demographic that supports Trump. White males. Me as a Christian, you as a former Christian. White males. We represent the most supportive demographic of Donald Trump. So there's a we-ness that I feel in this, and I take that seriously. We did it. There's a sense in which I can align myself with the people that I benefit from a lot of other white male social structures.
Sure,
I don't get to offer myself an out on this one.
Yeah, you could shoplift with impunity.
Yes, and I also have to take responsibility for this guy.
So number 2, which we'll go right into now on your list. But looks like this might be actually the new number 5 in the end. But we'll see. Your number 2 choice of potential outcomes for Trump is that the brother will be impeached.
That he'll be impeached. Yeah, that was that immediately upon. That my thought then was immediately upon taking office, they would have to get him through the oath of office, but somewhere immediately there would be his own behavior or conclusions about how he had what he was bringing to the office would cause the Congress to have to impeach him. I do believe that that's what's going to happen. I think maybe this is time to say what I think is going to happen. I think conservatives are going to come to the realization that if Donald Trump is impeached, the alternative to Donald Trump being president is not that Hillary Clinton becomes president, and that's what he's trying to convince people emotionally to believe.
Yeah.
Right? That the alternative to Donald Trump being the president after impeachment is that Mike Pence is the president. When conservatives recognize that they get all their conservative agenda in a leader without all the drama, they're going to take a bite of that apple.
As it is right now, they're willing to let the monster rampage because he is helping them.
Yeah, he's helping them. And when they realize they've got number of their big issues, taxes and immigration, especially, and a bunch of regulations rolled back. And then they could run 2 years, 2019 and 2020, up to the election this is for conservatives speaking, for the first time having a truly conservative president, that they could spend those 2 years posturing the country to say, we know you didn't like Trump, but he's gone now. Now it's Mike Pence. Re-elect Mike Pence. And the energy that will come around a Mike Pence from the conservatives and the relief of the Republicans who were never Trumpers, they could start that if I were a Republican strategist, that would be this. But I've been wrong about all this. But if I were a strategist, that would be the strategy I would suggest that they
and I think the more moderate leaning liberal people will probably be like, oh, well, he's a nice guy. Let's
Yeah,
I just fear that people won't put up any kind of opposition, or
it would be very hard for someone to, when we've spent all this time putting up the opposition to the way that Donald Trump is damaging the presidency with his personal affect and his narcissism and his incompetence, that Mike Pence isn't those things. He's a conservative that I've disagreed with since he was a talk show host in Indiana. Like, I've had my eye on this guy for a long time, when he was a congressperson and then when he was a governor and now as his vice president. So, I mean, I have no affection for the man's politics, whatnot. But once you've made all the arguments that the problem is Donald Trump, not just conservatism, then he becomes a very attractive option. So I think that still is what's probably going to happen in 2019. That's my best guess.
Well,
but back in the day, I thought, one of the options was that he would be impeached.
Well, it would be an end around for them not to have to deal with a Trump reelection scenario.
Right.
Having to support this guy, and
it would be fantastic for them, right?
Yeah.
They would then be able to say, just look at the policies. That's what you get in Mike Pence. It's their smart move. It's the smartest move they could make, is to not say we don't want to support the impeachment of the president, and then when the issues come out that the Mueller probe or that the Southern District of New York prosecutor brings out through Michael Cohen, his lawyer, if it becomes an option that Trump's resigning, because I don't think we'll remove a president. I think impeachment could very well happen, and then Trump would resign, and then Mike Pence becomes a president, and that is the perfect storm scenario for conservatives. Then they can spend 2 years unraveling from the Trump thing into the conservative thing. It's the greatest play of all time.
Well, it'd be a perfect thing for liberals too, as well, because we just had no idea how to fight this man in the media, how to respond to him. Everything just looked so impotent, compared to that.
Yeah.
Bullying.
Yeah. Well, I will say of Donald Trump being right, he tapped into the passions of a whole set of people that I didn't think existed. Those passions, and he captured them. He saw that they were real, and he built his campaign around them and exploited them in the best sense. Like, he utilized those as the energy. And so he was seeing something that the rest of us were not seeing, or he just saw his worldview and it just so happened to match. I'm not sure if he's a genius in that sense, or if he's just, I don't know, he was, a stop clock theory, right? He just happened to be what he thought, and it just happened to connect.
Or the one thing that he listened to from his advisors, that's what he held on to, was that,
yes,
that part, and got that right. All right, so number one was that Trump would not be able to take the oath through some sort of issue or whatever. And number two is that he would be impeached, and I guess that is still yet to be determined if that will happen.
Yeah.
And number three is that the Congress and Senate rises up in some sort of unifying way and stymies Trump's agenda.
Yes, because Donald Trump was constantly saying how he was not a conservative. He was barely a Republican. He had donated to Republican causes, had said he was a Republican, was pro-life or was pro-choice, all these kinds of things, and moved on some of those issues, which is fair. Somebody gets a chance to change political views. I've changed my political views. I'm not going to hold that against a guy. But that he was secretly not really who they were, and that the House and Senate would suppress his ability to accomplish his agenda.
Mm-hmm. That his agenda would be so outside of Republican norms that they would be like, no, we're not going for that.
Of the three of the five suggestions that I made that have been wrong, this is one of them. They did not stymie him. Just the opposite.
Because there was more of an enabling.
Yes. They have wrapped their arms, especially the Republicans in the House, have wrapped their arms around him, and then the Senate has just tried to take some long view where they don't care about the presidency. And I can actually see why some Republicans in the Senate, who have often argued that the presidency in modern day life has more power than it deserves, that there's three branches of government. They are part of 1/3 of that, and they deserve more credit. So if they have a weakened president, I think they're fine with it. I think they're fine with diminishing the role of the presidency. Some of those Republicans, they're totally up for that.
And I guess there's still time for that to happen. Like, let's say if, even though Trump demands loyalty, he's not very loyal to those who receive his loyalty. And so if he goes on a spree attacking his Republican the Congress, they may be like, okay, this is enough,
Right.
We're putting the brakes on by not letting anything proceed.
Right. We're going
to go back to our do nothing.
But as it turns out, Trump is so moved by the Republicans and conservatives that put pressure on him, that every time he tries to go in some direction, like on gun laws or on immigration or on regulations, they just come around him and say, no, you have to, and he just follows their lead. So not only are they not stymieing his action, they're actually leading him, these conservatives, in the way that they should go. Mm-hmm. That is the thing I feared most as someone who thinks that the conservative agenda in the United States can be damaging to the fabric of the common good.
And your next point, which seems to be, probably maybe the more realistic, is that his incompetence is inability. I mean, we didn't know this at the time, but his incompetence, his inability to navigate Washington and protocols and the way how the work uniquely gets done there, that would just completely make them impotent in their ability to push forth any legislation or anything like that.
Yeah, the big fear, on the Friday after the election was, what if Trump does these things that he says he's going to do? What if he rounds up people that whose passports and visas have expired and kicks them out of the country? What if he unfolds the kind of regulation rollbacks that he was talking? What if all that happens? And one of the ways I was trying to justify, we can, there's a little hope in the world still, is, well, he's so incompetent he actually won't be able to pull off a lot of that stuff. That's been more true. They have done a lot of things. They've created a lot of damage, and I'll give a metaphor for how I think we can think about this here in a minute. But Donald Trump's incompetence at being able to message to the country and drive an agenda, it's been just spotty and bits and pieces here and there. It's been a total disaster as far as what they stand for. It feels like what the Republicans and Trump stands for is Donald Trump. Right. That is the opposite of what any good conservative would ever want the president to do. The president should become less so that the agenda and the people can become more. He is the most anti-conservative president that you could imagine, in the sense that he has become the imperial president just by edict and by tweet and by whatever he's deciding at the moment, and just switching ideas literally overnight, like happened last week with the talking points that he gave to Nikki Haley to go out and to share. That by Sunday he's like, oh no, we're not doing that anymore. Did nobody tell Nikki? How come people aren't telling Nikki that we changed it? Oh, because I didn't tell anybody. That has been going on by people who study the White House nonstop. No one knows what's happening, what's going on, as he's driven people away from him. That his incompetence as a leader, and I hope that this is what I hoped for all along, that Donald Trump was never a significant leader. He wasn't a great business person. He utilized popularity and entertainment to build personal wealth along with personal debt, and he's just not someone whose skill sets you would want to emulate in almost any environment. So his incompetency, as it turns out, is worse than I thought, and it is the thing that is probably going to keep the overall damage of a Trump presidency from being too severe.
I mean, even as a liberal person, I still kind of have a bit of that. I have a bit of, I guess it would be. Ayn Rand. What is
libertarianism? I know you people that think you're liberals, you're just libertarians. Let's not fool ourselves.
Well, let's not shut down the conversation.
All right. I just, every time I hear the word libertarian, I just want to
it's shut
it down.
Look, I mean, there should be no poor people who are in favor of libertarianism, let me tell you. But is that, that the government is evil, like a necessary evil, but it is evil. And, and the less government, the better. And so I think that been appealing, to Trump, that as this outsider, he's going to do things differently. So, on his first day, he, ejected all of these people who work in the bureaucracy of government. Someone has to, there are steps to make things happen, and particularly with our diplomatic corps overseas. All of these people who have been, lifetime committed to the government and working in different, they're not all spies, but, people who've been in their careers for like 25 years, suddenly, nope, you're going home. There's this book out. I can't remember the author's name, but it's called The Death of Expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something where we have thought that, well, if a person is able to gain wealth, then they must, and I have not, they must have a level of intelligence that I don't have. And I think that in government, you definitely need intelligence, but there's a level of expertise that's involved in, how you get things done, how you get your agenda pushed through. And it's that lack of expertise, I think, that, may contribute to this thwarting of some of his agenda.
I think that's right. Just doesn't know or care how it's done, and fundamentally believes that how it was done before created this problem, so let's do it differently. He's a kind of contrarian, and as a fellow contrarian, that I don't appreciate. He's one that just that seems to be believing that the people who've done this before didn't solve all the problems, so let's do it differently, as opposed to some of these things are not solvable problems in our lifetime. We have to respond to them now in a long-term process of changing the problem solution equation. It's a more sophisticated way of looking, and I think Donald Trump just believes, just get different leadership. Like when he would tweet before even running for office about what he thought the president should or could or was doing, it was just it was like somebody who had never taken a course on or a class in 6th grade on civics. Like he didn't know, seemingly didn't know, or he was playing a part. It's really hard to tell. And here's the thing: for people that think that that I shouldn't be so hard on Donald Trump, I believe Donald Trump is a caricature. I believe President Donald Trump and the public Donald Trump is a caricature that Donald Trump, the person, plays. He is playing a role that he is well suited for. I think it does fit his personality, but people that have known him over the years will talk about him being a kind of person that they don't recognize when the camera goes on or now that he's in the office.
Oh.
So
like this this is kind of a different take on him.
Yeah, and that's true of anyone who's in leadership. Barack Obama is famous for having said during the 2008 election, came home and Michelle Obama said to him, like, how are things out there? And he goes, well, it's so interesting. This is a little fable, apparently. It's so interesting. I keep hearing about this Barack Obama that everybody's talking about. I can't wait to meet him. He sounds like a great guy. Right? He was recognizing that certain leadership roles, you create a version of yourself and you play into it. It's a public role way that Donald Trump has understood that. So I am not suggesting that Donald Trump as a human being, as a child of God, as one for whom the divine light shines as it does in all of us. He is part of the salt of the earth and the light of the world as a human being. His way of functioning in this office and his way of functioning in public and his treatment of other people is not him. All of us are a person that is lovable beyond our actions and our behaviors and our chosen intentions. His chosen intentions and way of being, I think, are extremely damaging.
So Doug, your generous orthodoxy is showing.
So I can be aggressive against that way of being because without personalizing it. And it's very hard in any leadership to not do that, to feel like it's Donald Trump that I have a problem with. And it is in that sense. But Donald Trump has chosen to brand his name as his identity, as a lot of us who are in the public view have done. So it's a hard balance to walk. And I do want to be clear that I don't actually despise the human being, but there is a way that he is behaving and has behaved in his public life that I just think makes him morally unsuited for this role. That's been the thing all the time. Like, I don't know. I never watched his show. I didn't care. I didn't care about the Celebrity Apprentice or any of that stuff. Just go about your business and do your thing and whatever. And everybody can cheer on who they want to cheer on. But when you choose to take on this role, you are making a commitment. You're entering into an entire conversation with with and that puts a requirement on you, and his unwillingness to honor that office because of his need to perpetuate his illusion of himself is where I find it to be damaging. So,
and I think that's maybe something that poor people really can't grasp, but they're actually people who think that that the government is an impedance to their success, and like they're above the government in a way. I mean, not legally, but
yeah. I mean, Reagan made this argument a long time. That's a staple of latter 20th century conservatism. Government is not the solution. Government is the problem. Fair enough. That's an argument made by lots of people, and I fundamentally disagree with it.
So in your tone, I could hear a little bit of the the better angels of your nature, as you were pontificating about the potential positive, like there could be some good in Donald Trump. And so that brings us to our last point, which is that Trump moderates, that he actually disengages some of this buffoonery.
Yes.
And actually kind of comes more towards the middle, and
that the weight of the office and the responsibilities, he has to respond to that by saying there's other parts of me that I want to engage and to include, and that's the direction I'm gonna go. I thought that was possible. I thought that not just that he would moderate on his policies. Like, look, elections have consequences as far as which political system is going to have sway. That's a fair deal. That's the cost of losing elections. I think it really matters, and people should try to win elections. But when the other a perspective is the one that's voted for, then that gets its sway. That's part of the deal. Don't have a problem there. I thought Trump, not only was he not going to follow the hard line that he was saying with a wink and a nod, but that he would, in his own personality and temperament, draw on some other resources that I'm sure a person has. And he has not done that. Again, he has gone the other way.
Well, so. You kind of heard time and time again, like, there's no way that this guy can be this flawed, that there's got to be some sort of master plan where he's going to be like, hey, surprise, I'm really,
Yeah, look, I'm like all the rest of you, I get it. Let's now get busy, and I'm going to surprise you. So I had Al Franken in my head about this. Al Franken, who was a firebrand. Al Franken, who was a super partisan. Al Franken, who was aggressive about conservatism. Mm-hmm. He was a comedian. He was crass. When he became a senator, as a senator from Minnesota, he changed his tack. He said, I'm not going to go that direction. I'm going to go this way. He changed his direction, changed his tactics. He said, I am a person who understands more issues than just what my comedian persona has allowed me to utilize, and that's what I want to use. It was great. I think he did a fabulous job. But I thought there was a chance. This is one of the 5 options. I thought there was a chance Trump would end up being one of those guys, and people would say, like, "Wow, he actually is a very bright person who understands how to utilize his skill sets for some kind of common good." Now, maybe that's what he thinks he's doing. I don't know. It's really, I think Donald Trump clearly believes that he's a successful president right now. I think he believes that he is. So maybe he's just like, well, I don't have to modulate yet because this is right. Yeah. This is really working. This is going great.
I'm killing it.
I'm on fire, baby.
Look at those poll numbers.
Yeah, look at those poll numbers. Better than Barack Obama's. So I was wrong about 4 out of the 5. Yeah, he did take the oath of office. That one didn't. I mean, I wasn't wrong. I said these are 5 options. 4 of them clearly didn't happen. He did take the oath of office.
Yes.
He was not yet impeached. He was not boxed in by the Senate. I think his incompetency is harming him, and it's the best thing we've got going. Keep him incompetent. This is the fear about the Pence storyline that people fear is like, okay, he won't be incompetent. He'll unroll this stuff, and the country will spend 150 years trying to recover from hard-edged conservatism.
Right.
I'm in that camp. And he didn't modulate and become a more moderate figure. He's right. I'm wrong. He wins. I lose. That's the story. I feel a bit like Lindsey Graham. If you follow any of that stuff, if you're not a total political nerd, you might know.
Hey, so let's do this. What's going to happen next?
Okay, here's what I think. I really do think what's going to happen is that there are going to be charges.
Now realize that this may.
Yes.
A year from now.
Here are the 5 things that I think are going to happen or possibly could happen. I really do think there are going to be charges of a significant enough nature where conversations about if Donald Trump can stay the president through this term are going to be raised. Mm-hmm. I really do think there's going to be a strong movement to enlist Mike Pence into that office.
You think that's going to happen in this year?
No, I think it'll happen in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the Mueller investigation is going to still take a while, and there's going to be still drips of things. It just takes a long time for these investigations to play out. And, we're at the end of April right now. I think it's going to be, the fall election is going to be a turn election. So I think all that's going to happen. I think Democrats are going to win the House. I think there's going to be a great sense that they're going to come really close in the Senate, if not win the Senate. And I think there's going to be this big push to try to clear the deck for 2020 when all sites, on the 7th of November, after the election, when all attention turns to November of 2020, that's 2 years away, that is going to be, it's going to be a foot race to see, or there's going to be a big movement for people to run against Trump and to not even get the Republican nomination. And it's going to be, in this way, it will feel very much like what happened with Nixon, even though he wasn't up for re-election. But he's going to lose all the power that he had. And when they lose, this is what happened to Obama. When Obama lost the House after the first 2 years of his presidency, it really weakened him for a period of time because people said, you're not as powerful as we thought.
Right.
You didn't change the landscape the way that we thought. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think the best way for us to think about all of this is the way one thinks about a natural disaster, a hurricane, a flood, an earthquake, that it's happening, the damage is real, it's going to end, and then we're going to have to think about how we rebuild. And what we're doing is shoring up the damage while it's happening now. So boarding up windows or opening up water lines or shutting off gas to make sure that you don't have fires, the kind of things you do in a serious natural disaster. And then you have to be prepared for the long-term response and cleanup and restoration. And we're going to have a candidate in 2020 from somewhere across the political spectrum that can talk about how they're the person that can usher the country through the kind of restoration that is necessary around the presidency.
At this point, have we reached a point of no return in anything that Trump has done that he has undone that is going to be very difficult to bring back?
I don't think so. Even on taxes, all of that can be reworked with another Congress. Like, this is the problem with our country, and also the great benefit is that hardly anything is permanent. It's only permanent by agreement, right? Every law, every Supreme Court ruling can be undone. Nothing is settled where people say, like, well, we actually decided that. You can just make a law that reverses any other law, and Supreme Court and federal courts can make rulings that just change the path. So nothing is all that permanent. And the things that Trump has accomplished are the kinds of things that a president can do at the stroke of a pen. Unfortunately, that's what Obama was able to do as well. It's increasingly difficult to make change depending on if you get something into the Constitution, a constitutional amendment is a really hard thing. But there's been nothing close to that. The nomination of Supreme Court justices is a pretty big deal because of how they function. But Supreme Court justices are surprising. They're less partisan than we think they are. And a lot of us partisans believe that judges that we appreciate vote the way they do because fundamentally they're partisan. And many of them do it because their view of the law, their vote is driven by their view of the law. And that makes them unpredictable. All the way across the board. So every president has been disappointed in their own. So that would be the only one. I think the damage done is so severe Trump presidency that it will be 30 or 40 years before this country has come to full grips with the damage that his way of being the president has caused. It's possible that we will never go back. If Nixon was a turning point in doubt about the presidency and the morality of the presidency, and then if Reagan was another shot at that, and then if Clinton was another shot at that, and if Carter's incompetency, like they all put a stain on the imagination. Mm-hmm. I think Trump's version of this is going to be generational, 40 years before people are able to fully grasp when the president of the United States is attacking the entire process of judicial oversight, his own attorney general and FBI directors. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that when Hoover was functioning in the with the FBI in a way that the FBI was being used by the president. Yeah. That was so damaging. This is the opposite of that. The separation between these two and the severe doubt that is being unfolded.
Trying to delegitimize those organizations.
Yeah. So one last thing I think is going to happen. Donald Trump is fundamentally a conspiracy theorist, right? You look back over the years and the things he's talked about from the 1980s when Reagan was president and he was running ads in the New York Times against Reagan. It was conspiracy theory stuff. It all kind of falls.
Like the birther things.
The birther thing is another great example. It's just been a series of those. Who Muslims are and burning, flags, and like it is who immigrants are. His view of the world comes out of this kind of obscure way of thinking about facts that are only used to propagate a particular view of the world. That's Trump's way of being. The fact that there's a forthright public conspiracy theorist who will say that news is fake, this news is real, don't listen to that kind of way of being, that is the damage that I think will be very hard to undo, because that is a unleashing of a set of suspicions about this country that we have tried to have the more legitimate governmental expressions keep a lid on, and that lid has popped off. His lean into the white supremacy narratives, his lean into conspiracy theories, his lean into who's out to get me and who's out to get you, his lean into the it's all rigged, all that stuff. And I know there's a lot of
motivations of anybody who has anything to negatively say.
And I think that's ultimately well beyond the damage that this natural disaster is going to cause. I think that is what will be hard to chase out for the next 40 to 50 years.
Well, now you're talking, Doug.
Nice to have you back, John.
Oh, thanks.
Music. Mm-hmm. Hey, all right. So if you like the video version of this, that's what you're watching now. If you're only listening to this on the podcast, Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt podcast, try watching the video sometime. And if you only watch these on the videos, like honestly, if you're still watching this all the way in, you probably would love the audio.
Need help.
The audio version as well. All right. Is that good?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Good on the video? All right, everyone. Back to your regular programming.